Hello, and welcome to Connecting to the Stars with Mary Edwards here in San Francisco. I'm here with the amazing star and legend, Barbara Lamb, and we're going to it's great to have you here, and we're going to talk about our ET Friends in Space book today, which we're excited to share with you. And first, I'm going to tell a little bit about myself. I'm an artist and an interior designer and a teacher. I worked at multifaceted design firms and taught art and art therapy to kids and college students design. I worked at firms for decades creating homes to hospitals to interiors for the International Space Station. I had my first ET contact with my father on a spacecraft at age 5. And I didn't really understand what the heck he was doing there, but that's part of the story here today, which we can talk about later. My father and grandfather were rocket scientists and had a large aeronautical aerospace company that designed and manufactured heavy rocketry. So I was blessed to grow up with space that sparked my imagination with the stars and the planets, and I always wanted to do a book to inspire other kids like I was as a child. I am an ET contactee, ET Hubit hybrid, and I have 128 hybrid children living on and off planet. So I'm going to introduce now the incredible Barbara Lamb, who is not only a star, but a legend. And she can tell you about her thousands of regressions, all her international work and work that she's done healing and helping people for decades. So it's an honor to have you here. I'm your cherished friend and can't wait to share the rest of the hour with you today. So welcome aboard.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. That's wonderful. Very pleased to be with you. You say I'm amazing. I think you are amazing.
Oh, well, thank you. Back at you.
Yes, we are in our own various ways.
Yes, we are. Different and similar. Well, both have very positive attitudes. We're
Right?
both experiencers and we both love what we've done our whole lives. So that's a blessing right there, isn't it?
Yes.
ETs have only enhanced it, and then all the community and the people that we've helped through interiors and regressions. And I think with our little book here, we're going to jump into in a few minutes. We're here to help heal and help make the world for kids and adults better if we can, with information
Yes.
and kindness and learning tools about positivity and how good the ETs are. So I'd love you to just go ahead and explain your background because you can do it a lot better than I can.
Yeah. Well, I've been a psychotherapist for a long time, since 1976, and did a regular therapy practice until about 2017. But I'm still working vigorously with doing regressions. Anyway, in the mid 1980s, I began to get 5 years of training in doing regression therapy. And that was focused mostly on past life regression therapy. And then in 1991, the first person came to me who had been very, very traumatized and confused by having unusual visitors come into her room at night and frequently take her away for various experiences. She didn't know that they were called extraterrestrials or aliens or star beings. She just knew that they were coming and she couldn't stop it. And she was absolutely terrified. Well, we did 6 regressions and 6 different sessions. And she got so much help from that and realized that in some of those instances, the beings had been healing her of real physical problems. And that was a wonderful thing for her to realize. And we finished our meetings together with her saying that, oh, she just felt very pleased that she was part of all this and she had never known what it was before, but she's very pleased to be in contact with the other beings and was even going to move away from her parents' house into a little cabin in the wilderness with her boyfriend. So that meant she felt really confident that if other beings came, it would be all right. And I'm sure that other beings did continue to come to her. So that was a great beginning for me. in this part of my work, and I was extremely interested in it as well, not thinking that I had had any of those experiences myself, but wanting to know more and more about it. And as it turned out, in that same year, 1991, there were about 5 other people independently who came to me for regression work about their extraterrestrial experiences. And very typically, they knew just a little bit about the beginning of one of the encounters, and none of them remembered the whole event. But the details did come out from the regressions. Now, the way that this works, as I understand it, is that we all have a subconscious part of the mind. And the subconscious part of the mind records absolutely everything that we experience. That means that the subconscious part of the mind records even those things that have occurred to us that we were not consciously aware of. And that's why we can go into a regression to a particular event or a particular question that the person is wondering about for themselves and find out the details, find out all the information that we need. So that began a long career now since 1991 of regressing people, and it's been at least 3,000 people, and many people have had numerous regressions if they lived close enough to me. So it's been nearly 5,000 regressions that I've conducted to people's extraterrestrial encounters. So, of course, this has been extremely important work because the people all say that it's been so helpful for them to know the details of what has happened to them. Usually they'd only have hints and clues or maybe a memory of 1 or 2 or 3 moments of visitors appearing in the room and beginning to levitate them up out of the bed. And usually after that, they don't remember anything. And yet maybe the next morning or whenever they become conscious again, they realize, oh, I don't know what happened, but something really happened. I wish I knew what it was. So it's so wonderful that we can find out what it was in this process that we call regression. So in all of this work, I've been very, very aware that with most people whom I'm aware of who have encounters with extraterrestrial beings, their experiences began way back in early childhood. In one case I worked with one man, he even had his first encounter when he was still in his mother's womb. And some of these people had their first encounter when they were infants, even still in the hospital, the first few days after birth, and sometimes, during the infant time at home, and then other years after that. Some people go back to their earliest remembrance, maybe at about age 2 or age 3 or age 4. Those are very typical years for them to have these experiences begin. So anyway, when a child is having an experience like this, he usually has nobody to talk to about it who knows about this sort of thing. Hopefully that's gaining now because more and more information is out about that, like even Mary and I talking about this today. But anyway, children usually find that if they mention that they had a visitor or more than one visitor in their room the previous night, the parents usually sort of fluff it off and say, oh, you have a very active imagination, or that must have been a dream that you had, or it must have been what we call an imaginary friend. But so often the parents don't know about this phenomenon, and so they don't honor it for the child, and they usually don't ask more. So the child finds that, there's no point in mentioning it to his parents anymore because they're not going to respond with anything. They don't seem to know about this or even seem to be particularly interested. The child is interested,
Right.
but that's very frustrating when there seems to be nobody to talk to about this. And usually grandparents don't know about this, and the child's friends don't know about this. So the child basically feels pretty much alone in having these experiences and, just doesn't really know what to do with it. Now, some children really welcome these unusual looking visitors and they consider them their friends. And that's wonderful when they do that. However, many children look at these visiting beings as monsters or ghouls or savages or demons and some of them look at them sort of neutrally, not as friendly or as unfriendly, but just they make up names for them, like, oh, the Wookiees came again last night, or the Gudgies, or they make up little nicknames for them because they don't know of any real name to give to them. So there's quite a mixture of the feelings that various children have about these visits. And in many cases, it's very fearsome, and they will pull up the covers over their heads when there's a visitor in the room, hoping to hide, hoping not to be noticed. But of course, they are noticed and they are taken for the experience anyway. But that just seems to be a normal reaction. I've heard so many people say that when they were children or even as adults, and there would be an unusual visitor in the room, they'd immediately pull up the covers and try to hide. And then, of course, the person, whether it's a child or an adult, is made to not move. The person cannot move and cannot call out. So even if there's somebody else in the room sleeping with that child or adult, or even if there's somebody right in the same bed with the person, the one who is being affected by these visitors cannot move, could not nudge or elbow the one nearby, and cannot call out because these visitors have a very effective way of making anybody else nearby, even in the same bed, completely out of conscious awareness. That doesn't mean that the people are harmed in any way. They're just out of awareness, as if in an extremely deep sleep. So the one being visited is kind of alone in the experience. Very often, a child will be aware that parents are in the next room or in the bedroom down the hall, and they would like to call out for help, and they find that they just can't. So I'm mentioning right now some of the very frightening aspects, which I'm sure we can all understand. And the child is then, if still consciously aware, is aware of being levitated, floated up out of the bed, and the covers sort of fall away. And then maybe even remembers enough to feel the child is being floated across the room and through the wall. So we don't know how they do that, but these beings have amazing ways, abilities that I don't think that we have, or we haven't discovered them anyway. So those experiences for many, many children are frightening. However, if the beings that come into the room are likable by the child, sometimes they feel like, oh, this is kind of an adventure. I feel like I'm going to go with him and I don't know where. And then, unfortunately, they usually cannot consciously remember where they went or what the experience really was like. So anyway, it's quite a mixture. And again, the important thing here is that the children have no validation usually for these experiences. The parents won't validate them because they don't really believe that it was something real that happened. And any other playmates they might have, or sisters or brothers, they usually don't know about this. So they can't really give any important feedback.
That happened to me. So it was, after all my regressions, you did my first regression several years ago,
Yeah,
and I went up once, then I went up again, and then I went up again, and nobody would talk to me about it. So I just said, forget it. And it was started getting sort of interesting and fun because, you can't, when you don't get any response, and I didn't know that my father was part of the government and secret space and couldn't talk to me or tell me about it till
right.
recently. But it's, and as you know too, that many of I was taken 3 times, 5, 6, and age 10, up to a spacecraft. Some of the others that happen in their homes or at a school or at a backyard are a little bit different. Maybe not as scary, maybe as some of them are, correct? So,
Yes, well, there's such a variety of the
right.
ways that these experiences, these contacts begin. And some of them are viewed in a more friendly way
Mm-hmm.
by the recipient,
Mm-hmm.
and some of them are not. There's just a huge variety of responses that people have. So, anyway, here we have a child who is growing up and having these experiences now and then. It's not every night, might be every few weeks or every few months or every few years. And sometimes they might be aware of the encounter, sometimes they're not. However, there are clues often that the person has been having these experiences. There could be markings on the person's body that they don't know how those markings happen to be on their body. They know they didn't inflict them themselves. So there might be a little pinprick mark or a perfect little straight line of pinprick marks or a little circle of pinprick marks somewhere on the body. Or it might be a triangular shape of pinprick marks or a triangular bruise marking or a scoop shaped mark, looking like a little scoop of most of the layers of the skin has been taken out somewhere on the body. That is very, very typical of people who experience these things. Or it could be a straight line white cut, like a little white scar that wasn't there the day before or wasn't there the night before they went to bed. So, these clues kind of add up with the little hints that somebody was there in the bedroom or on the playground or in the backyard or wherever the person was taken from by the beings. And so after a while, by the time a person is adult, very often they begin to put all these little pieces together and wonder. And that's when they start looking for information about this phenomenon. And that's how they find me, mostly at conferences or interviews I give or lectures. And so people are always so grateful to find somebody who can really work with them and help them to know what has occurred. And then there may be plenty of people who have all these hints put together and they decide, I just don't really want to know. And so they don't do anything about that. And of course, either choice is their complete right
Mm-hmm.
to do so, choose as they wish. So, anyway, Mary and I, in our very adult years, fortunately met at a conference. And Mary is such a go getter. Oh my goodness, energetic person, just doing a million creative things. And she got together with me and wanted to have a couple of regressions. And through the process of that, we realized we had a lot in common in terms of our sincere interest. And we came up with the idea of producing a book for children about children's extraterrestrial experiences. And as far as we knew, and we did a lot of research, both of us,
Yep.
about children's books, as far as we knew, there was nothing out there in the market, anything like what we wanted to do. And so we decided, let's do a book that's based on children's real, genuine experiences that I knew about from talking with children and regressing some of the children and talking to the parents of the children. And there was so much that I had already learned
Mhm.
about children and their extraterrestrial experiences. Also, in the many, many regressions I was doing with adults, in the regressions, sometimes, in fact, quite often, the adult would go back to one or two or three of their own childhood experiences with the extraterrestrial beings. So they might not have consciously known as an adult that they had had these experiences during childhood. And sometimes the information about that definitely come, and the memories come out during the regression, even a regression to an adult experience. And then there are many adults who do remember that, these unusual things used to happen to them when they were children. And it was just a big mystery because, of course, they had no one to talk to. There was no programs about it and no children's books to read. So
Right.
Miriam and I have put together this book. We consider it a treasure. And
Right.
I think really it is.
It is.
The full name is Kids Adventures with E.T. Friends in Space.
Right. And
It's
here it
based
is.
on real accounts
No,
from my regression, where there it
right.
is.
There it is.
I
And
just smile whenever I see this book because it's full of the truth told in a children's sort of level
well,
way,
well,
a
that's
very
why
simple way.
exactly. Well, and I just want to say before we walk in and we'll go through some of the pages, I was one of those people that you were talking about that waited my whole life to really figure out what was going on. I knew those were real to me. I knew I was not making that up. You can't make that up. It's like, why would you want to make that up? And then I started going to astrologers when I was 18. I moved to Boulder, Colorado and I found an astrologer and I learned a lot about my past lives. And then I started dripping over the years. I thought, okay, I'm not crazy. And my parents still, until they passed, never talked about it. So just before we dive into the book is one of the best moments of my life was this last year after my dad had been gone, passed about 10 years ago. I found a channel that could talk to him, and after many different attempts to talk to him and through people, and I said, Dad, oh my gosh, how are you doing up there? And he said, I'm fine. I said, I'm so mad at you because you never told me anything. You were there that first trip. And
Um,
since then, and so we've had, as Barbara knows, we've had about 30 conversations over the last several months. And I said, why did not you tell me all those years? And he said, I wasn't allowed to. I was working for the government. He was a pilot and lieutenant in the Navy. He was working with the U.S. government for him and his father and his grandfather's big aeronautical aerospace company, and they were sworn to secrecy. So finally, and he said, we couldn't do that, Mary. I was duty of my country, duty of the Navy, duty of everything. So, and that's too why I always really wanted to do a book like this. I started with a little book that I never published called I Am the Universe, because I thought, why do I have all these dreams of time traveling out to the stars? Why have I always been drawing star memories and doing collages for my whole life and working with kids on and also teaching art? So anyway, my validation first came with you and then with my father's channeling and admitting to me that he couldn't share. But I spent my whole life literally thinking I was alone, I was really crazy. Neither of my sisters had any of these experiences. I mean, I have asked them about it to today, and this is decades later. And so this we wanted to do something playful and kind. And I just want to read the first part of it. So anyway, this is me at 5 when I went up. This was a little gray that was up there. There were several grays, and there were a couple Arcturians and Pleiadians up there on the craft, I do remember. And we wanted it to be friendly and not threatening, like Barbara said. This is a positive book with positive experiences. And just to take my sort of DNA one more generation, my daughter worked at NASA. Lizzie worked at NASA several years ago. And I would draw little pictures for them. She was working down at Moffett Field, and they bring school children in. And I kept saying, oh my gosh, I'm giving them little rocket ships to draw when the class with private schools are on the Bay Area, because Moffett Field's, down in Silicon Valley, and I live in San Francisco. So I'd say, well, which do they like? And she said, well, Mom, they love the little drawings that you make that they can color in, because it connects them to who they are. She said couple of them said, oh, wow, this is really interesting. A spaceship, I want to be an astronaut when I grow up. So anyway, we realized she really, and I've taught art to kids, we understand what the power is of art and color, and doing kind of a positive coloring book. And I'll just read what we wrote in the beginning of our book here. Dear reader, here's our first page here that we wrote together. When we became moms, we learned the value of reading together with our children and encourage them to keep an open mind. We dedicate this book to all children and grandchildren who are the pioneers of the future. We hope to inspire young minds to the magic of the universe and to other possibility of otherworldly surprises. Ain't that the truth? It's up to future space explorers to discover and share new information about the universe. So we said, enjoy. And then I just wanted to read one more thing just about the overview of this a little bit. So some background on some of the stories. We know that millions of people worldwide are recognizing that they have been visited by and taken away by otherworldly beings. These beings have gradually been identified as extraterrestrial beings who seem to be coming from other planets in unusual spacecrafts. Interest in this phenomena has been increasing since the early 1980s, with many people's sightings of UFOs and orbs, and expressed in many UFO conferences, ongoing UFO organization films, interviews, blogs, television specials, YouTube specials, and books. And of course, now we see them every week with the Navy and the military and people with their iPhones sharing their ET experiences. It's become quite a phenomenon, as we know. The scenarios in this book are taken from 4,000, this was last year when we made it, 4,000 hypnotic regressions conducted by Barbara Lamb with people who either knew or suspected they had experienced encounters with these unusual beings. A typical reaction to having these unfamiliar beings is fear. Fear of the differentness and fear of the unknown. Who, what are they, and what do they want with me? Was my first reaction too. This book will hopefully reduce these fears, yet we acknowledge that many people have had disturbing experiences. So we're not disavowing that in any way, but we're just showing some of the positive learning ones here. There are many different species of extraterrestrial beings, ranging from more scary looking ones to friendly, benevolent, loving beings. These visitations and abductions usually begin during a person's childhood, as you mentioned, although they might not be remembered until later in life. Children and adults have a variety of reactions to seeing unusual non-human beings nearby. Some are startled by their appearance, some are curious about them, some feel fear, and some welcome them as playmates and friends, which we talk about in the book. So hopefully children reading this book will assist parents, hopefully reading this book to children will assist parents in helping their children who have encountered these beings and may possibly being helping themselves. we wish to open their awareness to other intelligent lives in the universe and of the benefits of knowing each other. Many of them are very interested in us humans, and we can learn to reciprocate with interest in them and learn a lot from them. So, Barbara, I thought I'd just hold up the pictures and you can walk through and just describe some
Sure.
of your regressions. Let me get up
Yeah.
here a little bit closer so people can see the image. There you go.
Okay. Well, this particular picture is showing a little boy in the middle with the orange pajamas, and he's on a spaceship, and he's looking out a huge window that's part of that ship. He's looking out at two other planets, and the one in the distance happens to be planet Earth. So he's really quite excited to be out there in space, even though the beings he's with are very unusual. He doesn't see them back on Earth. But anyway, here he is up in a spaceship looking back at his own home planet, Earth. And it is really quite a thrill. And that happens to many children whom I know, that they have been taken by the beings and allowed to look out a window at planet Earth. I mean, what a privilege that is. Yes. So that's a real true happening that many children experience. Now, this one is important too because it shows something very, very typical. Here's a little girl in bed at night, and in through the window is coming four beams of light. And when she looks to see where those beams are coming from, she noticed that there's sort of an unusual shaped craft of some sort that they seem to be shining from, even through her closed window. And then she notices that there are three beings, short beings, standing right by her bed. So in this picture, she has sat up to get a better look at the beams of light and at the beings. And then she is going to be levitated up out of that bed and taken through the wall and to that ship for whatever those experiences will be. So anyway, this is a very typical scene of somebody in bed at night, a child, or even when adult, and waking up and finding that there's light in the room and that there are beings standing there, beings who are definitely not human beings. Okay, let's go on to the next.
Okay.
And then the next step, usually after that, after being levitated up from the bed and floated through the wall, usually the child or adult finds himself floating up through a big beam of light, like being drawn up, sucked up through the light. And in this case, there's a little being behind her, sort of following her, guiding her through the beam of light up into that craft where she will have various experiences. Okay. And this picture also depicts that sometimes, instead of going up in a beam of light to a ship, a child or an adult will be taken through what we call a portal. In other words, sort of an opening in space. And very often it's an opening, kind of like a shortcut from Earth to a spaceship way out in space or to another planet. And sometimes a portal is an opening from our third dimension to another dimension, a higher dimension. So here we have a little boy in his pajamas being led by two beings toward the portal, and he will go through the portal with them and to whatever the rest of that experience will be. All right. And For many children, they get to a point where they think it would be a great adventure to go camping out in their own backyard. So that's the case with this little boy. He's set up his tent already, and he's going to be sleeping in it out there in his backyard. And he has his little dog with him. And but before he actually gets into the tent, in this case, he notices that up in the sky, there's a luminous craft, and it's sending out some light from the bottom of it. And this is just showing that there is going to be an experience between him and the beings of the craft as the craft comes much closer, and he will be taken for an experience for an hour or two, and then he will be returned either to the grass outside the tent or inside the tent. And he will be returned home safely from whatever that experience was. So this little boy is unafraid. He's there. He's aware that there's a craft and it's coming pretty closer and closer. And he may or may not at that moment know that he will be taken, but he will be. He will be having a full experience, which, if he wants to know the details of that experience, if he doesn't remember too much of it, he can always find somebody to conduct a regression on him and find out what happened.
Right. So we'll do a few more pages because this is probably fun for everyone to see what we did here and what kids are really experiencing.
Oh, okay. Well, here's a little boy who was taken during the daytime, probably from a play yard or wherever he was. He might have even been with other children. And then the craft came nearby, and he was taken by beings without the other children even being aware of it. This is very typical. A child or a person of any age can be taken from a group of people, and with all the people having had their consciousness turned off for a while, and the consciousness of the person who's being taken is turned off too, but they go ahead and have a full-fledged experience. So this particular child remembered part of this, and part of it came through regression, that he was taken aboard a ship, and there were other beings like the ones that you see on the left, and he could see other stars and planets through the window. And then you can see there's a big control board there, and he is actually being shown how to technically fly that ship, the UFO that they are in. And there are many children I know who have been trained from a very, very early age to be able to focus their minds so concentratedly that they learn to fly the ship with their minds. And in this case, the boy is probably being taught to fly the ship with certain mechanisms, more like the way that we do it with instrumentation and so forth. But anyway, he's very pleased. He feels very, very privileged that he's been given that opportunity.
I want to do that.
Yeah,
I've been
a
a
lot
space
of us would
pilot
like to do
in
that.
a couple of my lifetimes too. So wow, I love that picture. And here's one
Right.
about healthy healing, right? This is a
Yes, it does have to do with healing. You're right. Here is a big tub, and there's a little boy, and he is not feeling well. And the beings are so psychic and so telepathic that they know he is not feeling well. So they have prepared this tub with fluid, and you can just barely see that the boy is in that tub, the boy with blonde hair over at the right end of the picture. And his little feet are sticking up. So he's soaking in the tub of a healing liquid. We don't know what that liquid is made up of, but It apparently gets absorbed through the skin into the boy's body, and he becomes well. Whatever his malaise was, it gets cured by soaking in that liquid for a while. And then we see that there are various kinds of beings standing around him. At the far left, we have a green reptilian type of being. And then we have a long blonde haired Nordic type of being, perhaps from the Pleiades. And then next to the right, we see a tall white being, and often they're referred to by people who have contact with them, referred to them as tall whites. They're usually about 7 feet tall, sometimes even taller, and very thin and totally white, and very benevolent beings as people experience them. And then to the far right is a mantis being. They too are very tall and very thin and huge eyes, often greenish in color, sometimes brownish, sometimes black, sometimes white. But anyway, they are very advanced beings, very wise, very knowing. Often they are in charge of whatever goes on for the person taking to the ship for the encounter. So let's go on, see more of these amazing experiences. Oh, here's another example of healing. There's a little boy lying on a cold table, very flat, metallic type of table. And there has been something ailing in his body. And we have a little being right there by his chest, pointing some sort of instrument that looks like a wand, which is emitting a healing light. And the healing light is going right down into the middle of that child's body, and he is being healed of whatever was wrong inside. And we also have another gray being standing by, watching and maybe assisting. And we have one of the tall mantis beings directing that operation. And it sometimes happens, as in this picture, that there's an upper gallery, like a little balcony, on which there are other types of beings. So we have depicted various types of beings, or different colors, uh, different sizes, different shapes of heads, and so forth. And at the far right of that balcony, we see what we would call a child hybrid with very sort of straggly, spiky hair, looking partly human and partly not human. And that's what that hybrid is. It's part us humans and part one of the other species, or maybe even more than one of the other species. So let's go on from there, Mary.
Okay.
Fun for me to share these pictures.
Really fun.
And
Story at
remember,
the campfire. We're at the campfire sharing these stories. We had so much fun making this all year last year.
yes, and just remember that these are all based on real accounts from real children and from real adults having known the details of their childhood extraterrestrial experiences. So this is very typical too, that a child will be taken and will receive healing light energy from a tall being. In this case, this is a tall Arcturian beings. There are many Arcturian beings who are known to be very benevolent, very loving and caring about human beings, and they love to heal the human beings whom they have contact with. And they're teaching the human beings all kinds of wonderful things, especially how to be really helpful on Earth. And so here is a little girl. She's been taken onto the ship, and she's not only receiving healing energy from this Arcturian being, but you can see light coming from her hands too. She is learning to share her human healing energy with others as well. And she will be able to use that skill when she's back on Earth. In fact, many of those children grow up to realize, after maybe being in the corporate or the business world for a while, that they don't feel like they're doing what they really came to do. And they will eventually get into their own healing work, and they will make that their career. And then they feel like, ah, good, I'm here doing what I'm really supposed to be doing. And some of that, you see, begins in childhood when they are taken by these beings. All right, next one, please. And this is very interesting because between the beings and us humans, there often is this sort of transfer of information that goes from the eyes of the little being right through the eyes of the human. So here we have a little girl holding hands with the being who is just her size, and yet he may be adult, but he is sending information that he thinks it would be helpful for her to know, information that they have, but we don't have, sending that information into her mind through her eyes. And she is simply receiving it, just drinking it in. And then there's another function that can happen that looks very similar to this. And that is that the being will look deeply into the person's eyes and seem to know everything there is to know about that person. So the child, in this case, could be receiving information or could be having her mind scanned for the information about her and maybe her lineage and her family, her history, her abilities, her DNA, anything that they want to know about her. Again, it's a reminder, let's finish with that, a reminder of the abilities that they have that we don't know that we have.
Right. Well, we can
At
do.
least I don't.
No, I don't either. I wish we will. We're going to continue learning. That's what we're here for. So we'll maybe do two more pages,
Okay.
and we can do part two next time because we had talked about that. Would be nice to be able to share what we've done if people don't have time to buy the book or just what they can see visually. Because we tried to create this simple, not elegant, but simple, childlike, kind format and simple drawings, so people really weren't fear-based, because we are here to help prepare and condition kids for what they may not know about. Maybe this will help trigger an experience that they didn't know that they had had before. And more ETs and extraterrestrials are coming down the road, so this will help for down the road too, to engage kids to see what's going to happen in the future if they haven't already seen any.
Yes, I think you're making such a good point, Mary. And um, I think that many people tend to have fear about the thought of, oh, maybe the beings will be coming more and more, or maybe we'll see a huge fleet of UFOs overhead. And of course, we've had scary movies like Independence Day. We've also had some positive movies too, like E.T. And but still, I think there's been a lot of sort of fear and what I call booga booga
Yeah.
out there about the whole UFO phenomenon and extraterrestrials, and are they real and do they come here and what do they want, and if they come en masse, what will they be wanting with humanity? So anyway, I think that the more that people can know that there are some really favorable things happening with many, many of those extraterrestrial beings, and that many of them really care about us and want to help us, that is all to the good. to balance out all the scary stuff that's perpetrated.
Right, and a reminder too, is what maybe we'll close up part one here of this in the next couple of minutes, but like humans, all humans aren't bad. There's maybe a small percentage of really bad news human beings that are either negative or bad, and that's the same with other species. So
Yeah.
what we put in the beginning of the book, a drawing that I love doing, was a reminder that we all come in different shapes and sizes and colors. So this was a little drawing. All planets and all people are the same, different. So as we get older, life starts changing. It's always good to be reminded that there's always positivity. And I know I have learned so much from the ET experiences over the decades of my life, as I know you have. They've helped me, they've taught me things. I know when I get downloads, I've been off planet with them. They're here. I know I have been watched and protected, and I know why I am shifting out of my part of my old life to come and do this too, to really spread the love and about what we've done and what you've done in your life and what I've been learning more and more. There is so much positivity. And as we are now we're in a revolution, sort of an evolution after these 26,000 years and 2012, we're moving into a whole new happy, unified time right now. And that's why a lot of us are here to really help lift and shift and see that the possibilities are good and that we can all be part of a team and a community to help others who don't understand it or are fear-based. We can lift them up with our suggestions and our learnings and teachings and skills to create a more homogeneous and happy life for now and for the future.
Yeah.
So anyway, I love being with you today. I think we can say sayonara right now, but I loved having you on, and we'll do part two and talk more about some of the ways to prepare and condition children and adults, because we all need it. So do our kids. We help each other learn. And
Yes.
we'll take it one step further. So anyway, thank you, Barbara. It's been always a pleasure seeing you. You inspire me, and I love that we did one little part to help shine some light on something that I think has been really scary for a lot of people.
Yes. And thank you so much, Mary. This has been a great pleasure.
All righty. Well, thanks again. See you all soon. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.